Welcome guys, welcome to the South Padre Island Birding Nature Center and Alligator Sanctuary. This is the place on the island to learn about and enjoy the amazing nature of South Padre. Here at the Birding Center, we have about 43 acres of coastal wetland environment. Our wetland is unique from the rest of the wetlands on South Padre Island because we have a dual wetland ecosystem. We have two types of wetlands right next to each other. Here, at the start of the boardwalk, we are in a saltwater wetland. The first stretch of the boardwalk is going to take us through saltwater influenced wetland that is completely tidal. The water comes in and out of this environment here from the Laguna Madre that we see in the horizon. All saltwater. The plants and animals in this half of the boardwalk have to be specially adapted to tolerate the high salinity. We're completely surrounded by saltwater on South Padre, but what makes us unique is that the second half of the boardwalk will take us through freshwater wetland, one of the only ones on South Padre. You'll see as we go down the boardwalk how the plants and animals completely change as we go from the saltwater environment into the freshwater environment. So follow me, we'll take a nice walk here and see what we can find. Here we are at the Laguna Madre, guys. The mother lagoon here. The Laguna Madre is a shallow saltwater estuary. This is an incredibly important and productive bay system. This whole bay here runs along the west side of South Padre Island, and it's about 3 to 5 feet deep. Very, very shallow. Because it's so shallow, it allows for a few things to happen that make productivity immense. All along the bottom of the Laguna Madre are masses of seagrass beds that cover the bottom like a carpet. And in those seagrasses are the base of the food chain. That is the habitat. Those seagrasses are a nursery site to an immense diversity of fish, shrimp, and other sea life. If it was deeper out here, the sun wouldn't be able to reach the bottom and we wouldn't see the seagrasses growing. Because it's shallow and the sunlight can reach the bottom, the seagrass is able to grow. That is the main habitat here in the Laguna Madre, the seagrass beds. Here along the saltwater side of the boardwalk, the plants here have to be especially adapted to tolerate the high salinity in the water and in the air and in the soil. Not all plants can tolerate the high salinity here. So this landscape is mainly dominated by two different kinds of plants. Black mangrove kind of grows like a tree here in this subtropical climate. We have a mangrove forest here. Black mangroves are pretty special. They provide a lot of nesting habitat and shelter and food for wildlife. They have thick leathery leaves that help them push out salts so they can better live in this coastal wetland. Also, they have these amazing roots that help them breathe here in the intertidal zone. Here along where the tide line is, soil is waterlogged, there's no oxygen in it. These mangrove roots need oxygen, so they have these special roots called pneumatophores that they push out of the mud like a snorkel so that they can breathe. Another plant that dominates the landscape here in the salt marsh is saltwort. Saltwort is a low-growing succulent plant, one of the only plants that can actually grow out in the salty mudflats. They have small succulent leaves that retain water really well, even in these salty environments. And they also have a long taproot that helps them reach fresh water deep in the soil. Pretty barren out on that mudflat, these salt marsh habitats are some of the most productive environments on the planet.
Our alligator sanctuary, the gator rescue portion of what we do, began in 2019 in conjunction with a company called Gator Country. So they're an alligator rescue and sanctuary. So what we do is we provide a place for alligators to stay who have been abused, or more often than not, we rescue nuisance alligators from the wild, which are usually alligators that have been fed by someone while they were in the wild, and as such they have been deemed a threat to human life. So the alternative for those animals is to be put down, so we give them an alternative to that by bringing them to a sanctuary and letting them spend the rest of their lives with us. So we wanted to introduce you to Miss Judith. Judith is one of our rescue alligators here. It's an unfortunate situation. She was actually reported to us in early January. Someone in Estero Grande State Park had spotted it. They estimated to be a 4-foot alligator with its mouth taped shut. So we were right on it. We got a hold of Texas Parks and Wildlife, got permission from everyone, went out there January 6th to go and get her. It was quite a process, involved kayaks and brooms for paddles and all kinds of crazy stuff. But once we captured her, we got her to shore and started to untape her and immediately noticed that the situation was much worse than we had previously anticipated. Upon removing that tape, we noticed that her jaws were completely misshapen. She has an acquired physical trait where her skull continued to grow while that tape was on her, and as a result, that had misshapen her face. So unfortunately, she will have to live with that, but through her recovery and her rehab process here, she's come a long way and she's doing excellent right now. So once we got her eating again, that was a massive step in the road to this alligator's recovery. So I think people come here for all different kinds of reasons. So we see so many different walks of life come through here. The young, the elderly, different people from all over the country, from different countries. Everyone is brought here for a different reason, whether that's the birds, the coastal wildlife, or the alligators themselves.
We're about to leave the salt marsh behind and we're starting to get into the freshwater wetlands. Man, it's a windy day.
Here in the coastal area, it's really incredible how something outside of this planet has such an immense impact on the wetland environment. Specifically the moon and its different moon phases. During the new and full moons, that tidal activity is crucial to replenish energy here along the shoreline. In between, you have the neap tides, when you have the quarter moons. When you have the quarter moons, the Earth, the sun, and the moon aren't aligned anymore, so there's less of a gravitational pull on the water, and there's not so much tidal activity. The new moon and full moon create the spring tides. They're not called that because of the spring season, but they're called that because the water springs up because of the gravitational pull.
Oh my God, there's a great blue heron right there. Wow, that one is so bright.
I know, it's ready for spring. Look at its legs.
Definitely ready for springtime. Yeah, those bright red legs, wow.
The biggest negative effects that are being suffered here along the coastal areas are due to habitat loss, mainly because of urban sprawl. A lot of these vacant lots and vacant wetlands over the years have become homes, condos, houses, hotels. And here on South Padre Island, there's only so much wetland available. And over the years, we've been losing more and more of it due to development for the most part. So development is the major drive in habitat loss. It's extremely important to preserve and conserve some habitats to the best of our ability for the wild things, because every year there seems to be less and less space for the wild things to thrive. So places like this Birding and Nature Center are incredibly important sanctuaries, and increasingly so as we move into the future, where there'll be less and less habitat for animals. And we see that as we lose habitat somewhere else along the island, we start to see an increase of species here, because this has become one of the only wild places for animals here.
So these ducks, they're actually hiding their bill because a lot of their heat comes out of their bill. So in order for them to kind of retain that heat, they'll put their bill inside kind of their feathers and keep the warmth in there.
We don't usually see cattle egrets here very much. Cattle egret, the one on the left side with the little yellow bill, you don't see it in these wetlands very much. You actually see them inland a little bit more. They like to eat insects more than they do fish. So a lot of the times they'll be out in the pastures following the cattle around and eating off the cattle and in the grass. There's not too much competition between species, mainly because they're all like to eat different things. While the herons like to eat fish. The different species of herons like to eat different sized fish. So the gray blue heron, he would like to eat the bigger fish that the reddish egret really can't eat or swallow. So the reddish egret prefers to eat smaller sized fish. So they're not competing with each other much in that sense. And then the ibis out there, they're feeding on mainly crustaceans, but in the mud. So they're not really eating fish at all. And then these ducks here, they're mainly eating plant matter, like algae or seeds or roots. So all these birds can coexist pretty well together here without much competition.
So natural disasters like hurricanes, storms, and cold fronts have a big disruption in our cycles. Just like the cold front that we had here in Texas back in 2021, where here in South Padre Island we have this beautiful black mangrove tree that a lot of animals take shelter, they breed, and they kind of use it for foraging purposes. And one of the interesting things is, because these black mangroves died during that freeze, those leaves that go down to the water that a lot of decomposers use, that were not getting there. So a lot of the decomposers weren't eating, and so because they weren't eating, a lot of the other birds that were eating these decomposers were eventually not getting there. And a lot of people come here to fish, all right? So because of that, we have a lot of boats in our Laguna Madre, which actually causing disruption on our seagrass beds. A lot of those boats will actually, the propellers will cut off a lot of that seagrass bed. So overfishing is going to be a big problem maybe in the future. What we want to do here, we want kids to pretty much get educated and take that knowledge home, for them to kind of spread the word of what we're doing here, and for them to teach other kids and teach their parents, teach their family members about what we do here, and pretty much try to protect this beautiful place.
Our big takeaway from all of this is learning how to interact in the environment in a safe and healthy way, both for yourselves, ourselves, and for the environment itself. We don't need to be so hands-on, we don't need to be inserting ourselves in here, but no matter what we do, we have an effect on the environment around us. And it is our responsibility as naturalists, as people who are passionate about wildlife, to ensure that the effect that we have on that wildlife is positive.